there's a euphoric feeling. She's the one. This is God driven. All the things that you were saying, right?
Yeah.
That is a trauma issue. It was a euphoric. The same thing I felt about that job, because all the things that I was doing in that scenario was the same things I was doing at home, arguing, yelling, trying to protect, trying to survive, put out fires. It made me feel alive.
Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glenn.
All right, Dr. Glenn. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm excited. Today we're talking about why do we choose bad relationships? Now, are we talking about this from the standpoint of like friendships, or you don't choose family? So friendships or romance?
Both.
Both.
But specifically, it really shows in intimate relationships.
Okay, cool. So before we dive into this, I do want to let everybody know that we now have individual and couples coaching available through 12weekrelationships.com with Dr. Glenn. You guys can actually sign up for a free consult as well, so you guys can kind of learn what exactly Dr. Glenn and this entire framework can do for you. With that, with our sponsor message. Message? That was our sponsored message. We are our own sponsors. Okay.
Unless anyone wants to take us on.
One day. So let's talk about this. So first, what is the first point that you want to bring up in this?
So the first point that people often say is that opposites attract.
I hate that one. Can I just, I
You want to call bullshit on that one?
I'm calling it.
Okay, why are you calling bullshit on that?
Well, this one kind of miffs me for several reasons. I mean, it implies that there's this cosmic force that's pushing us together and all this kind of crap. Mm-hmm. And in reality, when I think about it, if I met somebody who I perceived as my opposite, like actually opposite, I wouldn't want to create a friendship or relationship with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people, they substitute opposite and complement. People can complement each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
one person may be more social. The other person is a little bit more reserved, right?
Yeah.
And so as a couple together, when they communicate, there's a complement there, but it doesn't mean that they're completely opposite.
I would agree with that. When I think opposite, I think of values. And if I meet somebody who I know doesn't share my values, I don't want a relationship. What I think you're describing, though, like compliments, those are like the small things in a relationship, right? Like one person being, exactly what you described, or one person maybe liking to read and the other person likes sports. And we tend to think of those as opposites when in reality, those are just different interests and personality traits.
Yeah, it's just how people can get along. It's more on a superficial level.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about opposites, you're talking about opposite values, completely different levels of living, and then saying that this is how people get along. It's completely BS.
Yeah, and I can think of friendships in my life and relationships in my life where they do have opposing core values, mm-hmm. and it's impossible to just want the relationship.
Well, just in general, like friendships in general, I haven't seen really close friends for a long time because we don't have similar core values. The history, but we have really nothing else other than the history.
Yeah. So those, in my opinion, are actual opposites when those values are opposing.
Yeah.
And in that case, I don't think opposites attract. I do think that people are horny in the case of romantic relationships. And do people still use that word?
Horny?
Horny?
I think
That's
so.
like my dad's word.
Well, what's the cooler term now?
I don't know.
Anthony, what's the cooler term for horny now?
Thirsty.
You're young.
No
Thirsty.
idea.
It's got to be thirsty.
Oh, is it thirsty?
It's thirsty.
It's thirsty? Oh, wow.
Oh, man, I'm so thirsty. But then what's going to replace actual thirsty? Like, Glenn, right now I'm thirsty. And no, I'm not like horny for you. I just want some water,
So what do you say in place of thirsty then?
I always assumed just horny was the term.
Oh, they flip-flop. I'm horny. It means that you're thirsty.
Now you're thirsty.
Oh, you mean replace? Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question.
When I'm thirsty, I'm horny.
Yeah, so you're horny. That's why you drank your water right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, so opposites don't attract. So why do we choose bad relationships? Okay, so it's not because of opposites attract.
It's not opposites attracts. You complement one another versus opposites attract. So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, euphoria. So it's one part chemical, the other part trauma.
Ooh, that's an interesting, trauma. This was one of those things that you brought up when we first started working together that I found very fascinating. But I had studied a lot of the chemical aspects of, especially, you feel it in friendships, but it's 1,000% more intense in new romances.
Yeah, so there's something in psychology known as the unconscious eye. So basically, when you grow up, whatever you didn't get growing up, anyone that mimics or can like recreate that experience through like a present relationship, it's going to create this euphoric feeling. So for on an extreme level, if a person was in an abusive home and then they meet someone who's abusive themselves, right? It's going to create this euphoria like, oh my God, I'm so connected to this person, right? Because now they have the opportunity to try to heal something that was unresolved in the past. And that gets mistaked for love quite a bit.
Interesting.
Right? On like a lower level, you know, if your daddy didn't discipline you, right? And then he gave you everything that you ever wanted. And then you meet someone who's kind of a hard disciplinarian because you didn't get that growing up. There's going to be this euphoria like, oh my God, I'm so attracted to this person.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's called the unconscious eye. So a lot of times people, their attraction is based on the trauma of an unresolved issue in the past, whether big or small.
Yeah.
And basically it's that need to try to figure things out.
What percentage of this, I mean, it would be hard to put a number to this, but isn't there like in that euphoria is also just the excitement of this new romance. It's the excitement of the intimacy, the stuff that, you know, researchers have shown are like chemically, they are just like drugs.
The oxytocin, the love drug, right?
Yeah.
So it creates this, definitely. So there's that component as well. But I think what's a good distinction is there's like the Eddie Murphy joke about the cracker. Have you heard of that one before?
No.
He's like, when you're really desperate and then you haven't eaten for a week and someone gives you a cracker, you're going to eat it and you're going to be like, this is the best cracker I ever had. And the salt and then the crunch of it and even the plastic wrapping was good. And I licked the salt off, right? Even though it's just a cracker, when you're in a desperate state, it's going to create this euphoric feeling. Like it's going to feel out of this world, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's just a cracker because it's coming from a place of pain, right? Similarly in relationships, and I've seen this a lot, like when people come in, they'll be like, I've met the one. This is it. I'm planning my wedding. And they're just on cloud nine and they're feeling so ecstatic and they're just planning. I just know.
That's a scary one.
There's a spiritual thing here, or I just know that this is it. That is their trauma issues coming out because it's coming from a very, very desperate state. Oxytocin in and of itself could be whole, right? It could feel comfortable, but it's not coming from this desperation that most people often feel.
So you basically have the natural oxytocin, the natural euphoria of like a new relationship, and then you exaggerate that with trauma. With the past issues that are kind of making you overvalue all of these things that you see like kind of right in front of you.
Yeah, and it's understanding the distinction between desperation and something that actually just feels really good.
Yeah, I feel like the same thing can happen, you know, in romantic relationships. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. In romances, you know, we have we know what this is. I think we've seen this a lot more. But in friendships, I do believe that this happens quite a bit too. And the excitement is often attached to, well, there's the general excitement of like, you know, if you meet someone who you think you're kind of like in tune with, you have what do we call it? Like a bromance or a womance, right? These moments where you're kind of platonically infatuated with each other. But you can imagine from the standpoint of maybe a person that was lonely, or maybe they didn't have a lot of friends growing up, or maybe they didn't have certain aspects. Like maybe they weren't, you know, the popular kid in high school, and so they didn't have any friends that were really into sports. And now there's this new friend that is an athlete. All of that can play into it too, like into exaggerating that feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is like a friend that I don't feel as lonely anymore. And also they're into this kind of stuff. And I don't think we think about it on that level. It just fills this hole naturally, and it feels good.
No, absolutely. But once again, there's degrees, right? Because if it's overly euphoric, then that's an indicator that this is a major issue.
Interesting.
Right? Because if you're older, who cares if you're in the similar sport, or like this is reliving high school? You're an adult now. Why would that serve any purpose from a practicality standpoint? But once again, that lets you know that it's playing out this pain of your past.
Yeah. So in these moments of like hyper euphoric states, it's important to basically slow down, to evaluate what's in front of you before you step deeper into something that might not be healthy for you.
No, exactly. Like, and who wants to do that when it feels really, really good? But if it overly, like it's over delivering on the feeling, then you have to know that this is a trauma issue for sure.
That's so interesting.
And even for me, like, and we did the episode at work, you know, I was in that really traumatized place at work. I felt euphoric picking that place because it mimicked what it was like for me when I was at home.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it at the time, but then later on I could look back and be like, oh my God, I had all of these euphoric feelings when I took that job.
Yeah. It almost feels euphoric can be one word for it, but also there's a sense of like normalcy. Like this is what I'm accustomed to. It's right because this is what I've known. Like it almost feels that way.
It's familiar.
Yeah. It has that familiarity to it.
But from a logical standpoint, you would think that, oh, I hated that experience and this is similar. It shouldn't feel good at all. So the fact that I could recognize that something's not right, like, because I knew something wasn't right, but in my mind, that emotion took over. Like, I got to be here.
Interesting. Okay. What else you got?
Number 3, we don't understand our own values.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So once again, going back to that work example, there was the trauma pains that I was trying to work through. And then logically, like I was even telling my wife, I'm like, I don't even want to promote. I just want to find other jobs that are healthier. So I had my values, but at that space, my past trauma was greater than the core values that I was trying to live. And then once that took over, I just was kind of in that space for a long, long time.
That sounds super fluffy, bro.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Why is that fluffy, man? I'm burying my soul, man.
I know.
I'm burying my soul, bro.
That was not very, sorry.
Fluffy,
yes.
man.
Yeah. Like fluffy, like I'm trying to make it practical, right? So
okay.
We choose bad relationships. Number 3 was what? It was, say it again.
Euphoria. We don't understand our own values.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that because you brought up your workplace environment, and for those that have been listening, you would know this kind of story. But that makes sense. But then, from a relationship standpoint, like non-environmental standpoint, right? That question of your own values. Most of us don't have an idea of what those values are. When what we think they are, they're actually not. And so we end up creating friendships. So if I were to bring this into in my mind, like a scenario that would maybe be a little more practical for me, Glenn, not for you.
Do you mind if I personalize it for you?
Yeah, personalize it for me, please.
Okay, so I'm going to get out of the fluffy zone then.
Yeah, no fluff.
All right. Yeah, we had the very emotional episodes that we did about our lives, right?
Yeah.
And then you mentioned your mother, right?
Yes.
And how she was not involved in your life.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that she had kind of personality traits about her?
My ex?
Your mother.
I didn't know her well enough to know anything. Really.
But even the descriptions that you gave from her, the way that she was handling things and kind of not involved, kind of withdrawn, and then calls you up when you're doing successful, is it fair to say at least that there's some type of personality traits that were going on there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then later on, you got into a marriage, right?
Yeah.
And then what was that person like?
Damn it, Glenn. I don't like this game.
So my point is even though you were living your values, like you were trying to figure out your values and you were doing Chinese, and that was your real values, like your hard work and all that. But once you chose, out of all the people you could have chosen, you chose someone that mimicked a childhood issue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is, and then there was a euphoria to it, right? So there was a euphoric feeling. She's the one. This is God driven. All the things that you were saying, right?
Yeah.
That is a trauma issue. It was a euphoria. The same thing I felt about that job, because all the things that I was doing in that scenario was the same things I was doing at home, arguing, yelling, trying to protect, trying to survive, put out fires. It made me feel alive.
You have cut away the fluff, bro. Thank you.
So, and I had to go through that experience as an adult to kind of reduce the trauma and then start living my core values. And that's how I see your story too. You had that experience, then you had the wife that mimicked that experience. You had to do the work through, just like we did it in this similar timeline, right? And then once we were able to move on and start living our core values, that's when things started to change.
Yeah. Okay.
What's your take on that?
No, now it makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I think you said it best just right now in terms of going back to, I'm trying to think of other friendships. And the thing is that you can find the same examples in friendship. The only difference in friendship is that you just don't stick with them that long, right? When it's a friendship, when it's something that you can end, the relationship just ends. When it's a marriage or something romantic, we feel like, it's something that we generally pursue a lot more, but the same thing applies. I'm trying to think back to some of the childhood friends that I chose, and it's like identical. Like they were like my ex-wife.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
It's kind of wild. Like it was like the same issues, like motherly issues that I didn't even know that I would have because she wasn't even there. But then when I think about these friends, they're people that are early friends were highly narcissistic, to the point where when I was with them, it would just like there would be this euphoria of like I'm not alone. I'm not, and that partly is because I'm an only child and I grew up, lonely in a place where nobody was like me. So that kind of ties back to that euphoria. Then, when issues do arise, it's like they kind of just check out, or it's their way, they do their thing and I am left to kind of pursue. But eventually there's a point of like waking up to like, we don't share the same values.
Exactly. Once you became independent and you started living your truth and your core values, that's when it all shifted.
Yeah. The friends shifted very quickly because those are easy to shift, right? Comparatively to like marriages. But that's interesting. Okay. What is number 4? You've got me. You've got me hooked, bro.
The other component, once again, going back to euphoria, it's a subconscious attraction to your pain, right? So when you're working through your core values, if you don't understand your core values, that means that you're probably in this pain cycle that you're still working through, which then goes to the next point. What are your core values?
Which we have a process of getting to.
Correct.
Probably that annoys people because you just keep asking why.
You keep going, why, until you get to the point.
Until you get to.
Until they're pissed off and they just answer it angrily. But hey, this is it.
I value, let's go down a line of, what this might be. So you want to do you, you want to do me?
I'll do you.
Okay. Do it to me.
In terms of what though?
You're going to get to one of my core values. Let's give them an example of what this looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Let's make okay. Do you want to do the example in terms of like the list?
No, just find one of my core values.
Okay, what's one of your core values?
I don't know. I like to read, Glenn. That's one of my core values.
Okay, why do you like to read?
I like to learn.
And why do you like to learn?
This is where everybody pauses and they think, why do I like to learn? Because kind of all the good things in my life have happened from learning.
What are some of the good things that happen from your learning?
Success in business, in personal life, fulfillment, all of it.
How does learning give you fulfillment? Or why does it give you fulfillment?
I mean, I guess it feels like I am working toward being the best version of myself. I'm working toward like making good use of my time here. I don't have a lot of time on earth and I want to maximize my time and my potential.
So for you, it's about like growth, maximizing your time, being the best version of yourself. But you also mentioned it's the purpose for your success. So like you equate learning to being successful in life.
Yeah, I do. Okay. Actually, wow. I never put it that way before. I'm not just joking right now.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not doing a role playing.
Oh, good. Okay.
I had this. Yeah, I thought like learning for me was more so reaching my potential, but ultimately what you said was simpler and it got straight to the point, which is I do define success by learning, or learning as the means to it.
But also you mentioned like growing up, like having like learning disability issues. When you learn Chinese and then you found the framework to learn, that gave you confidence. And then you started establishing frameworks for yourself. So that literally was the foundation for success in your life.
Yes.
Yeah. So learning equals success.
Yes. Learning equals success.
Growth and success. So that is a core value in which you live.
Okay. So to tie this back now, from our research and our case studies, we found that most people have 3 to 5 of these core values, right?
Correct.
Core values that extend beyond that one particular. So the activity that I in particular mentioned was reading. And I said that this is one of my core values. And that's what we typically do we typically would say that, going to church or reading or working or, providing for my family, these are my core values. When in reality, it's the underlying motivator, the reason for doing that. Because
Correct.
the way that I see the world, learning equals success. You're 1000% right. That's one of the core values that dictates almost 80% of what I do.
Well,
I love jujitsu because it helps me in the process of learning. I love to read, and I love to go and explore and travel in new places, and my partner, like, learning is a big part of her life, and that's one of the things that I value and I respect about her.
mhm.
But there's that similarity in value set there.
And that's another point that's a really good point, is understanding that if you don't have similar values with another person, you cannot have a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and that goes back to like friendships too, right? Because if I were to think about it, I don't have close friends who don't like to learn, like, who aren't. I don't just mean like to learn. I mean where learning is a big part of their lives. Everybody close to me matches that core value. I have gym friends and like friends that I'll work out with and friends that I'll, do other things with, but they're not close. They're just acquaintances. They're just kind of situational friendship type stuff.
Well, the other thing is, going back to the whole concept of an unhealthy relationship. If you know your core values, and then the person that you're attracted to, and you're like really like feeling like you're in love with them, but then they don't share your core values,
Hmm.
that lets you know that this is a trauma issue that you need to work out.
Yeah. And this ties back to, again, when you say like their pain or their trauma is greater than their values, what you're saying is that when I chose my ex-wife, what was happening was that I didn't recognize those values, or if I did, I didn't understand them, to a certain point. And even if I did understand what those values were, this hole that the person was filling, this trauma, this past experience, was the most important thing. It was greater than those values.
Yes.
But once that hole has been covered, once you've done the healing, once you've gone through and addressed those issues, then you're just left with, do we share similar values? And if the answer is no, then there's a kind of difficult path ahead.
Yeah, and then there's something in psychology known as differentiation, which is the ability to be your own person away from your group or family structures, right?
Hmm.
And so when you know your whys and you know your core values, you're starting to become your own person, and that's when you know that you can start making healthier and better decisions.
Yeah.
If you can't differentiate, then you're constantly in this trauma cycle of pain, and all your choices are going to be dictated by that pain.
That's fascinating. I'm trying to think in terms of friendships. When was the crossover point in my life where I started choosing friendships with similar values? And what's funny was, I think the crossover was about when I was 24 to 25 years old. From that point on, I started choosing friendships that were in line with like kind of me and the values that I had. I was already married at that time though.
But when I heard your story, I look at it like this is what life is, right? Because you're with your wife, your ex-wife at the time. That was your trauma still.
Hmm.
And then you started building your life away from her. And that was the start of your core value and your healthy place, until it got to the point where you're like, okay, this is going to dictate my life moving forward.
Yeah. One of
Yeah.
the things has to basically break.
At a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus just staying in that trauma state forever.
Interesting.
And I was in the same way. Like the whole job example, I was working at a private clinic on the side. I was dabbling into teaching. So I was still in the trauma state, but then I was little by little living my core values until it started to win out.
Yeah. It's funny how much time I spent on this subject, how many times we've sat and discussed and debated, and on a subject that we've talked about multiple times, and I find that I'm still gaining more clarity and insight into each of these things. Okay, so we choose bad relationships because we don't know our core values, we don't understand them. We choose them because, well, let's see here. We have some bullet points that
Yes, we
we've
do.
been covering. We know now what the core values are. That was kind of point 5, is like, what is an actual core value? But now we kind of touched on this, but how do they manifest? How do these values come up and manifest themselves?
I think when you're in the beginning stage, it's doing things on your own. Like when you're willing to do things away from other people and it's not for other people, but it's solely for yourself, that is a pathway to start becoming your own person and living your core values.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a very trauma-ridden environment or a trauma relationship, that is the beginning point to start figuring things out for yourself.
Yeah, that is probably the best indicator, right, of whether or not those things are actually underlying values. We get asked this question, and I do want to do this in a future episode. What we need to do is actually look up some dating profiles and let's evaluate and critique and how to like look at somebody's values, right? How to like
That would be an
understand and
interesting
interpret.
one.
I think that'd be fun.
That'd be really cool.
But for right now, you act them out in a natural way. Like for example, if you say that spirituality is a huge piece of who you are, if that's important to you, and then you move away from home and there is a church, the same religion, the same church near you, and maybe you go for the first couple months, but then you stop going or that you slow down, then that's a time to kind of evaluate, well, what was the underlying value there? Was I going to church because of my parents? Is it, respect of my parents that I was actually valuing? Is it my friendships, my relationships? Is it because of this societal pressure that I wanted to do the right thing based on what other people were saying around me? Or if it is an underlying value, if you truly value spirituality, if the core value is, I believe in God and I wish to develop my relationship with God or something along those lines, right? Then you would continue going to church without a second thought.
Absolutely. It's going to force you to find out your why.
Correct.
And maybe this person doesn't believe at all, right? But that would be important to know so then you can start living a value life that's true to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's looking at kind of how these things manifest. And similarly, if somebody says that, like myself, if I equate learning to success, then you'd kind of expect that if you're hanging out with me, you're going to see books on my shelves. You're going to see that I listen to a lot of podcasts. You're going to see my Audible, filled with books. I might be frequently talking about things that I bring up. You would see that in the way that I live my life. So those are the easiest ways that we can, not only know for ourselves what those values are, but that we can also kind of interpret when it comes to friends and family members and loved ones, like what are their values? Because it's more so like, what do they naturally do? And does that line up with who they think they are?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taking inventory of everything, right? So you bring up like core values are going to be like the healthy things about yourself and your why and your motivation for living. But at the same time, it's also taking accountability and inventory of the decisions and choices that you're making, because this is coming from a pain. Because we're not robots, right? It's not one or the other. It's usually a combination of everything. So it's trying to figure out how I can move into a healthier space. So,
Okay.
all right.
What else we got?
The next one, you attract your level of development. So I really love this one. So when people are like, like I'll have people come in and they're like, man, my partner is crazy. This person is crazy and they don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know why I'm with them. And then it's like, because you're crazy. Right?
Is that the clinical approach?
That's the clinical approach, because if you weren't crazy, then you wouldn't be with this person, right?
Yeah.
And then the whole idea of like 12-week relationships, what does a healthy relationship look like? People will argue about what a healthy relationship should be when in truth, they have no idea what it is. Right? So in these examples, when it comes to looking at like where you're at in relationships, the people that you're attracted to and the people that are attracted to you, it will give you every indication of where you are in this relationship process. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think it's spot on. I'm trying to think in my life when I was younger and I would say lonely and kind of looking to fill these gaps, my friends were generally kind of those people. If they weren't lonely themselves, then they were kind of more narcissistic and wanting to use somebody to like kind of fulfill something in their lives, right? So I can kind of look back and go, okay, all of my friends at these early times were either themselves kind of an outcast or they were somebody wanting to use outcasts or like, for this narcissistic role. And then as I kind of grew, and I would say one of my first genuine friends was, I see no problem in mentioning names. Aaron. I won't put a last name on there because
Sure.
who knows whether these people want to be mentioned. But I'm only going to speak names when it's my official story type thing.
You got it.
But Aaron was probably one of the first genuine friends that I'd ever had. And that was one where it was more aligned with, who I was and at the time. But yeah, I think you attract the exact kind of person that you are. And even then, even my relationship with Aaron, we were both kind of like awkward and weird. And we grew out of those stages somewhat. I think I still am awkward and weird. But now today, it's the same thing where like the people that I find now are similar. A lot of them entrepreneur. A lot of them are, they love learning. They're passionate about, like, look at yourself. Like they're into psychology. So yeah. You do attract whatever you already are.
No, I mean, I could look at my own like relationship history. And then so when I was in that very needy space, I would always be attracted to people that would let me be needy.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had a choice between a healthy partner and a person that's very closed off and is going to kind of just make me feel needy, I would constantly choose that person because that's who I'd be attracted to because that was my space at that time.
Yeah, what's so interesting about that aspect is you can compare it on multiple levels, even outside of like, let's say our relationships, right? Let's say you look at it from a business setting. If you were to look at this as one employee who is complaining and upset and always negative, who do they find in the business to get close to?
People that are negative and closed-minded.
Yeah, it's the next person that is willing to sit down and to be negative and to be and so the person that enjoys like their job, the person that enjoys the environment and takes ownership, there's not a relationship there to be had. So yeah, you do attract the person that you yourself reflect.
Yeah, I mean, in reality therapy, it basically states that if you look at all of your intimate relationships, it will show everything that's good about you and everything that you need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
It'll show your healthy qualities, but also things that you need to work through. Maybe there's trauma things that you have unresolved.
Yeah.
Like if you look at your history, like if you look at your friendship pool right now, does that apply to you?
Oh, 1000%. I don't have now in my current stage of life, and I feel like we're all evolving products, but where I'm at now, I don't have close friends that don't mirror my values or that are not a reflection. And I don't mean like it's not a reflection of one aspect of who you are. It's not like each of these friends have to be as successful in business or more successful in business or any of those things. It just means that everybody shares a similar mindset. Some of these friends are, like I'm going to give an example here. I'm going to make Anthony uncomfortable for a second.
Do it.
I can relate to Anthony very well, but we're at completely different life stages. Anthony's just a baby.
He's starting his life.
How old are you, Anthony?
27.
27. Okay. Doesn't have kids. I've got 4 kids. I'm engaged. I have a home and all these different responsibilities, but so it's not necessarily about like a person being a reflection of where you are in life in terms of like money or status or any of those things. It's a reflection of the things that you value. And I can tell that what Anthony values from the beginning is very similar to what I value in terms of like learning and growth and moving forward and not always choosing the safest path, but by choosing things that are more fulfilling. And so in each of those areas you can relate. And then it comes down to like, well, now what is the likelihood of being able to spend a lot of time together? That comes down to certain circumstance things. Like if Anthony doesn't have kids, I'm not going to be like, hey bro, why don't you come over and just hang with the kids for 4 hours while they scream and yell and make your life miserable.
Oh, he's making a happy face. He said, I want to do it, right? No.
But did what I say make sense though,
Yeah.
Anthony?
Yeah.
And what about, would you apply what was just said right now to the friends that you have in your life?
Yeah.
And then, Anthony is a person of learning. He loves going to museums. He loves art and nature, so he's really about learning.
Yeah. So to tie this back to, because the subject here is why do we choose bad relationships? And so far, we had, well, there's no such things as opposite attract. Well, there's this euphoria, and that euphoria is tied to trauma. It's also tied to the excitement and all these things, and that trauma can enhance that excitement. And then we have not understanding our own core values and then kind of letting trauma be the dictator of these things. And then, so this last one of like you attract what you are, but what you're actually saying is you attract bad relationships because you're reflecting those things.
Correct. And it doesn't mean that it's final, but it lets you know that this is where I'm at in life, and I can start making the necessary changes to be attracted to a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And it's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process, and it's being accountable for where you are at the time. So instead of pointing the finger, why does this person need to change? Why are you choosing that person in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? Why am I constantly choosing these partners that are not validating me emotionally? And once you start doing that, then you're doing the work to become healthier.
Yeah. It goes back to that idea of like, winners want to run with winners, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
I'm reducing the fluff. I'm personalizing it, bro.
Really?
Did that help?
No, that did. It made me stutter. So yeah, I'm gonna say yes.
Okay, so you wrote one last piece, which was bottom line, it's not the universe. So it's not the universe that's making you choose bad relationships.
So like you may have inherited a really difficult childhood or upbringing, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be the outcome for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the tools and the kind of starting point to give you indicators of what you need to heal and what you can do to start having healthy relationships in the future. So it's not a punishment, it's just a starting point, and then you have the ability to have healthy relationships in your life.
I think that needs to be one of our future episodes. Like, how do you overcome a difficult childhood? We all, I do genuinely believe that the vast majority of people on this earth have had difficult childhoods, and just to different degrees, right, of difficulty. But I know a lot that never get out of it, that it's always their why 40 years later, 50 years later, 60 years later, past their childhood. The why that they do the things that they continue to do and repeat goes back to, well, this is just the way that I was brought up, man. This is just what I know. This is just, a product of my parents.
And they're stuck in their pain cycle.
I think we got to cover that in a future episode.
Oh, for sure. And once again, that goes back to the terminology of differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot differentiate yourself from what you grew up, your family, and your pain, then you're not going to be able to break cycles in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the start of having core values and being that independent person and start living your truth.
But part of that too, bottom line, it's not the universe. Part of that is the first step is ownership and accountability. So why are you in a bad relationship? Because you chose it. Correct.
You may not have chosen where you were born, but you have these dynamics inside of you that you need to work on and fix.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one. It's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
But that's what's weird is that it's hard maybe to admit to yourself. Maybe it's hard for someone else to tell you that you chose this and whatnot. But that's the only pill to swallow if you actually want to change anything, right? Because if what we're talking about is actually the universe, if we're talking about, let's say, opposites do actually attract, and it is fate, and you were born like this, and this was the environment that you had, and if this is your reality, then you are completely powerless to do anything about it. You have nothing.
Yeah, you're basically living in learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Right? So you're at the mercy of your environment. There's nothing that you can do. So
I mean,
just take the bad fate.
Who are you to argue against God or this cosmic fate or any of these things? So I get that the pill of ownership is difficult, but then that's the only way to actually make improvements.
Yeah, so it takes fate away, and it's more about life is a school,
mm-hmm.
and it's a place of learning, right? And you have the opportunity to constantly make choices, and you can start moving yourself into a place of self-improvement and happiness.
We've said pill so many times that you know what I'm thinking about right now?
A pill?
Red pill, blue pill.
The Matrix.
Matrix.
That's right.
That's true.
No, it is true.
You can live in ignorance, let this world act upon you, or you can wake up and realize that you're just surrounded by shit.
But you can empower yourself and you could make decisions where you could get out of that shit.
But let's just be, I mean, we've covered what we wanted to cover right now, right?
Okay.
So we always keep it real, Glenn. But
Let's keep it
let's
real.
get extra real
All
for
right.
just a moment.
All right.
If you took the blue pill and you woke up and you were surrounded by shit, would you want to get back in the Matrix? Or was it the blue pill or was it the red pill? Which pill
I
woke
think
them
the
up?
red pill is the one that
Woke
I think,
you up, right?
I think that's the one that woke you
Okay.
up.
So you woke up and you realize that this is the world.
Yeah.
You get back in the Matrix or do you stay?
I'd probably get back in the Matrix.
Yeah, right? You're like, man,
Because they gave you that choice that you can own like a country and you can run the country. I'm like, okay, cool. That sounds pretty good.
oh, especially if you got the choice too.
Yeah,
If
you have
got the
choices
choice to
of how you
forget it
wanna
all
live
and like
and-
go back in.
And visualize and
That's a tough one. See, I didn't like that guy that ended up, killing everybody on the ship. But then, on some level, I can understand. It's
That
nice
makes-
to forget. Ignorance is bliss.
ignorance can be bliss for sure.
I'm just kidding, Glenn. If we ever woke up, I would be on your side. Not really. Just I'm gonna totally sell him out, and I'm gonna get back in the Matrix. And you're on your own, bro.
I'm going to be eating steak. I'm going to be running a country. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. I don't blame you.
Okay.
Leave me be, man.
On that very important note, we will end. All right. So that's it for this episode. Those of you that would like to look into our coaching programs, we now have coaching for individuals as well as for couples. And the entire premise is understanding what does a healthy relationship look like. And we get this question quite a bit, which is, well, I'm not in a relationship right now. Is this going to help me? Yes, you need to understand this stuff for yourself. I'm getting divorced. Will this help me? Yes, absolutely. You need to understand, not only because there's elements of all of this that go back to trauma. And so much of what you do is that therapy piece of identifying and addressing and helping. And beyond that, it's learning what does healthy relationships look like. So that way you can make the right decisions in your personal life, your romantic life, your professional life, all of it. But no matter what stage you're in, it is highly relevant. So you can book an appointment with Dr. Glenn by jumping onto 12weekrelationships.com. Dr. Glenn has been trying to persuade me to take on clients as well. But the thing is I'm focusing on our marketing and our growth and podcast and content and all that stuff.
You can do it all, man.
No, bro. That's one lie that I have fully rejected. I cannot do it all.
Just take the red pill, man. Just kidding.
All right, guys. Hope you all enjoyed the episode. As always, we'd love for you guys to hop on to 12 Week Relationships on our social media. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube. You can actually watch these videos. Yes, you can, of course, listen wherever podcasts are available. But the other thing, too, is that we've started taking questions. So if you'd like your questions answered on air over the podcast, then be sure to submit them. We do actually read all the comments. We reply. And we want to get you guys engaged. And don't worry, we are anonymous whenever it comes to actually discussing questions or case studies. We always keep things anonymous.
All confidentiality will be honored.
Correct.
Yes.
All right, y'all. Have a great one. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.